My father was a truck driver. He drove Mack trucks. My mother was a seamstress who literally worked around the corner in the dry cleaners around the corner, Hoffman Eisen Cleaners, from your house where you live now. I don't know if he's here, but I'm sure he'll be here at some point tonight. Brother Achille Buchanan. He was a student at Southside High School. He is the one who, as a junior in high school, started the petition drive to change the name of Southside to Malcolm X Shabazz High School, and that's what it is today. And that's because of his effort, and that's because of the student movement we have in. So we don't have to make nothing up. We don't have to embellish anything. We don't have to add more years onto it than is really necessary. We don't have to make up events. I have been in this struggle for nearly 50 years.
That's right.
Since 1971. And I have witnesses. And I have receipts. I got receipts.
Receipt.
My receipts are people standing in the crowd.
Yeah.
Students who were with me when I was the president of the student government at Arts High School. And we marched out in 1971, all 500 of us, and we marched downtown and we took over 2 floors of the Gateway Hotel, which is now the Doubletree Hotel. That's right. That hotel across the street from Penn Station in Newark. And as a result of that takeover, who did they send to get us out of the hotel? They sent Mayor Ken Gibson, the first African American mayor in the history of the city of Newark. Right. And literally 3 months after that, while I was 17 years old, before I had even finished high school, and before I was old enough, 6 months before I was old enough to vote, Ken Gibson appointed me to the Board of Education as a full voting board member, the youngest school board member in the history of the country. But see, that was because of a move. People don't say that part. They say I was appointed to the board. But how was I appointed to the board? I was appointed to the board because we had a citywide student movement. We had students marching out of all the high schools, demanding a quality education, demanding that our schools be adequately funded, demanding curriculum that reflected the demographics of the students that were in those schools. I am where I am today because of the movement, not just because of my individual initiative and individual accomplishment. And it's important to understand that.
That's right.
It's important to understand that after I was appointed to the board, I was 3 years on the Board of Education, and at the end of my tenure on the board, Ken Gibson said, well, he was the worst appointment I ever made. But why did he say that? Because I would not compromise. Because I would not sell out the young people of the city of Newark. Because I raised hell on the board. I raised hell 50 years ago. I'm a hell raiser today. I'll be a hell raiser in the U.S. Senate.
That's right. That's right.
And this is the time to raise hell.
That's right.
Because people are catching hell. Yes. They talk about a good economy. It's an economy that's good for the 1%, not the 99%. It's an economy that's good for the American oligarch. Don't call billionaires in Russia oligarchs. We got oligarchs right here in the United States. And one of those oligarchs is trying to buy the election of 2020. Right. But we're not going to elect another billionaire. We're going to elect another hellraiser, Bernie Sanders, to the White House. But I raised hell for 3 years on the board. And then after that, not only was I the youngest school board member, I was and still am to this day the youngest person to have ever been a certified candidate to run for the city council of Newark. I ran for city council at the age of 20 in 1974. And there's some people who are here that were with me at that time, but we did not win. And the question was, what would I do next? I went to Princeton University. I had been accepted at Princeton in 1971, but when I was appointed to the school board, I left to do the 3 years on the board, and then I came back to Princeton. And while I did get a BA in politics at Princeton, I got a PhD in hell raising also while I was at Princeton University. While I was at Princeton, we formed as students the People's Front for the Liberation of Southern Africa. That was the name of it. And we pressured Princeton to divest its funds from companies doing business with South Africa. And in 1978, after 66 consecutive days of protesting at Nassau Hall, we took over Nassau Hall, the president's office, for 2 days, 210 of us. And after that, Princeton divested from companies doing business in South Africa. That's right. And after that, I did 2 years of graduate work at Princeton. But while I was doing my graduate work, I was still organizing. We organized in 1979 the New Jersey Coalition of Black Student Organizations. There were black student organizations on all the college campuses, but they didn't have a statewide umbrella. And we pulled all those student organizations together from every college campus, and we had a conference at the Third World Center, a conference to get all the students throughout the state of New Jersey in the divestment movement to fight for the liberation of South Africa. And it caught fire. It caught fire on college campuses all across the state. And then in 1980, I came back to Newark, New Jersey after 2 years of graduate work. And when I got back in 1980, I still wanted to be organized. And what did I do? I pulled together 400 families for the People's Energy Cooperative. Because those of you who live in Newark and old urban areas know that a lot of people still heat their homes with oil heat. Yes. And they are the people are exploited. They're forced to pay these exorbitant prices to get heating oil. Some people go cold during the winter. So I organized 400 families, and I said, instead of buying your fuel oil individually, let's get together, and instead of 1,600 gallons a winter, we get together and we'll buy as 2 million gallons as a unit. And through that energy cooperative, we got lower prices for the heating oil and discounts on the service contract for those families that were in the People's Energy Cooperative. But the People's Energy Cooperative was not really the vehicle I was looking for, because when I came back, and when other friends came back from college, we wanted an organization that would fight for the people. We were not satisfied with the organizations that we saw on the political scene. We thought we needed organizations that were more aggressive, that were dedicated to mass mobilization, that would engage in civil disobedience. And so, in August of 1983, we founded the People's Organization for Progress, which has been in existence for 37 years. All grassroots, all volunteer organization working for racial, social, and economic justice. And after the People's Organization for Progress, you remember Jesse Jackson ran for president. In 1984, POP helped to form the Friends of Jesse Jackson in 1984. And then we were so strong that it forced the establishment, who Jesse was relying on in 1988, they said, rather than have them outside, we're going to bring them inside. So in 1988, I was co-chairman of the Jesse Jackson campaign. And many people don't know it, but Neil Gorfinkel knows it. And Neil Gorfinkel is in this room. And in 1987, New Jersey had the first chartered chapter of the Rainbow Coalition, of the National Rainbow Coalition. That was right here in New Jersey. And then after 1988, after the Jackson, I was a delegate for Jesse Jackson in 1988. I was in Atlanta when they stole the election from Jesse Jackson. And just like they tried to steal the election from Jesse Jackson in 1988, they stole the election from Bernie Sanders in 2016. But we're not going to let them steal the election in 2020. We're going to be like the folks in Iowa. We're going to have our own count. We're going to make sure the count is right here in New Jersey for Bernie Sanders. And then in 1989, we formed the Malcolm X Commemoration Coalition. We pulled together 110 organizations to have a metropolitan-wide celebration of Malcolm X, who did not get his due and his recognition. 110 organizations in the coalition. We had the biggest celebration to date. Where's Barbara King? I think she's in here tonight. We filled up the entire ballroom of the Robert Treat Hotel in honor of Malcolm X in 1989 through the Malcolm X Commemoration Coalition. And then in 1989, that's when we began to really get involved in the fight against police brutality. Officer Gary Spath killed Philip Pennell in Teaneck, New Jersey. And many groups came together, even before Sharpton had the National Action Network. He was in Teaneck, we were in Teaneck, Salam Ishmael United Youth Coalition. We were there to fight for justice for Philip Pennell, who had been shot in the back. According to the medical examiner, he was on his knees with his hands raised when he was shot in the back by Gary Spath. But do you think that he was found guilty? Did he get as little as a ticket, a summons, any kind of violation? No, he was not found guilty. But his mother and his sister are supporters to this day of the People's Organization for Progress, and they were just with us. We formed in the 1980s the New Jersey Anti-Apartheid Coalition. We have been successful in getting universities to divest, but the state of New Jersey had billions of dollars in pension funds that were invested in those corporations that were holding up the white racist apartheid regime in South Africa. We put together the New Jersey Anti-Apartheid Coalition, and we sat in at the State House, and the governor of New Jersey signed the executive order to divest pension funds, New Jersey pension funds, from companies doing business in South Africa. All I know is the movement. I don't know anything else. I tried to do something else. I tried to go into the corporate world. I was a second-level manager at AT&T Information System. I was trying to conform. I was trying to bow down. But something in me wouldn't let me bow down. I had to stand up. I had to keep fighting. I had to keep fighting. Ben Chavis came to me when I was a manager at AT&T. I worked at AT&T headquarters in Morristown, New Jersey. He came to me, he said, Adimo. Adimo is my African name, and many people still know me by that. I got that name from Amiri Baraka, and I make no secret about it. You're not going to see me. Somebody says, well, Mr. Hamm, do you repudiate Amiri Baraka? Hell no. I will never repudiate Amiri Baraka. Don't even come to me with that dumb stuff. That's right. Don't even waste your time. No, I am a product of the people's movement. I'm a product of the Black Power movement. That's right. The person that helped to shape my consciousness and what it is today was Amiri Baraka when he had the Committee for a Unified North in New Jersey. He was the one that told me I should be proud of being black, not be ashamed, not trying to straighten my hair, not use bleaching cream to light my skin. He was the one that told me to look to Africa, that was our homeland, and we should be proud of our homeland and our
That's
history
right.
and our culture. He will always be my poet laureate and the people's poet laureate. Always. But Ben Chavis came to me in the mid-1980s when I was at AT&T. He said, Larry, I want you to come and join the Commission for Racial Justice of the United Church of Christ. And I want you to be the national director of the community organization program for the Commission for Racial Justice. I said yes. And I'm so glad I did that. And I say on the record, you'll never hear me say anything bad about Ben Chavis, because that man hired me when nobody else would hire me. He hired me, but you know what he did that was more important? He took me on the Freedom Ride. We had a Freedom Ride in 1987 to retrace the roots of the Civil Rights Movement, to go to all those places. I've been to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I've been to the 16th Street Baptist Church when I was on that Freedom Ride. I don't understand. You know, when I was a kid, when I was young, you you first come into the movement and you think you know more than everybody else because you done read a couple of books. You done read a little bit of Marx, a little bit of Lenin. You done read a little bit of Kwame Nkrumah and Malcolm X, and then you think you know every damn thing when really you don't know nothing. I'm going to tell you something. When we went down south on that Freedom Ride, I had never seen darkness like I saw at night down south. Like, they don't have that ambient street light that we have. You go down south where the roads don't have street lights. The bus I was in almost hit the church when we arrived. That's how dark it was. And then I had to think about these civil rights workers who didn't live down there, who came from cities in the north and in the west and in the east, came from these cities, came and walked those dark roads that were not just covered in darkness, but were haunted by those terrorists like the Ku Klux Klan. They risked their lives. We walk around here today all pumped up. We can live here. We can live there. We got this job. We got that job. We got this degree. You wouldn't have that if it was not for the courage of those young people who went down south and put their lives on the line to fight for voting rights, to fight for civil rights. So I'm so thankful. I'm thankful that I was working with Ben Chavis. I remember when we went to the 16th Street Baptist Church, and that's the church where the 4 little girls was killed. But it wasn't just them 4.
That's right.
21 had been hurt very bad. But they had on the wall, they had a plaque. Now this was in the 80s. The plaque was metal, but it had their images in the metal plaque. And they had the names and the pictures in metal of the 4 little girls. And we had a tour guide on that church. You could see when you stood in the pulpit and you looked down, you could literally see where half the church had been blown away and rebuilt. There literally was a line that went through the roof, dividing the old half that didn't fall and the other half that was blown up. And when we were leaving, we asked the tour guide, well, what can we take away? We didn't even know that our tour guide was Deborah McNair's father. He didn't even tell us that. He didn't even tell us that till we were getting ready to leave the church. And he said that if I can keep fighting after they killed my daughter, if I don't give up, you can't give up. And we shouldn't give up. That's why we're fighting today. That's why we're still fighting today. And then in the 1990s was the Million Man March. And there are some of the women in support of the Million Man March here. And some of the men who went on the Million Man March are here. I was the state coordinator for the Million Man March in New Jersey. I didn't volunteer. Minister Kadir Muhammad of Mosque number 25 came to me. And he said, Brother Larry, would you help us organize the Million Man March? And we had our first meeting in Reuben's Restaurant on Court Street. And Sister Bay was there. Sister Frederica Bay is in the house. Give
That's
her a
right.
hand. She was there. Sister Bay was there.
That's right.
Sister Bay was there. And we saw that the women, that they wanted to have a role in this thing, that they should have a role in this thing. And that day in August, when we met at Rubens, that's when the Women in Support of the Million Man March was formed. And this little state of New Jersey, we took more men. We had 255 registered buses on our registry. We took over 75,000 men down to Washington by bus, by train, by plane, by car. For not 1 million, 2 million men were in Washington that day, October 15th, 1995. Don't come to me with that dumb stuff about Farrakhan either.
That's right. That's right.
I am not going to be up here. Look, they always come to us to ask us to repudiate people. Well, why don't they repudiate some of these racists and monsters that they have put in power? Don't come to me. I'm not the one. I am not the one.
That's right.
We had the Million Man March. And then when we got back to Jersey, we had a march on Trenton. In 1996, the largest march on Trenton was the Million Man March of New Jersey. 6,000 men marched on Trenton. And we didn't just march for moral reasons. We had an agenda as quiet as kept. There was a social justice agenda for the Million Man March. It's a book. You can go get it. You don't have to take my word for it. And we had an agenda then. And at the top of our agenda in 1996 was stop police brutality and stop racial profiling.
That's right.
And after we marched on Trenton with the Million Man March in 96, we had a statewide march. We formed a statewide coalition against police brutality. And we marched on Trenton to demand an end to police brutality and an end to racial profiling. And then in 1997, what happened? Abner Louima.
That's right.
They took a man
99.
into a police precinct, not in Chile, not in Argentina, not in Thailand, not in China, not in India. They took him into a police station in Brooklyn, New York. And an officer named Volpe took a broomstick and broke the handle, and then took the jagged edge of that handle and jammed it into the rectum of Abner Louima, punctured his rectum, his spleen, and his bladder. And even though it didn't happen in New Jersey, we were rallying here for justice for Abner Louima. And I bring that up because I think what happened to Abner Louima was a real nodal point. Even before Diallo, it was a nodal point in the struggle against police brutality. Because when we hear about these things, they're so horrendous. We think, oh, that could never happen in America. But it did happen in America. And then after Louima, we marched for Louima. Then after Louima, it was Amadou Diallo.
Yeah.
You know, this week we passed the anniversary of the murder of Amadou Diallo, which was February 4th. And then in April of 1999, in a police station in Orange, New Jersey, they tortured a man to death.
Earl Faison.
They tortured Earl Faison to death. That's not my word. That's not my assessment. That's the assessment of the regional medical examiner, who said that Faison died in a stairwell of torture. But what did the police say? The police said that Faison fell off the chair and died. But the day after he was killed, 2 days after, his family came to us. Earl Williams and Segura Williams and Earl's mother came to us and said, our son did not die by an accident. We went to see his body, and they said there was a footprint on his forehead. And we said, we're going to support you in this struggle. And you know what happened? the county prosecutor, who was black, and it's important to grasp this, brothers and sisters, because a lot of us, sometimes we get tripped up. Race is a complex issue. It's not as simple as people would make it. And one of the things we learn is that the amount of melanin you have in your skin is not necessarily the determinant of justice that you have in your conscience, in your consciousness. This is an important thing to grasp, because if you don't grasp that, you will be in situations where you think your enemies are your friends and your friends are your enemies. You know, I'm not trying, don't get it twisted. I'm not making excuses for racists. I know who the enemies are, but I'm telling you, it's not just what's in a person's skin, it's what's in their consciousness.
That's right.
It's what's in their consciousness. You remember what one Cuban revolutionary said to Malcolm X. He said, where does that leave me? He said, I'm not black, but I fought a revolution in Cuba to help the people. This is a question. This is why we didn't call it the Black People's Organization for Progress. We could have called it that in 1983, but we didn't call it that. We called it the People's Organization because we want to unite the oppressed people as one to fight for justice and equality and peace for everybody. I know I'm going on, but I'm telling my story. This might be the only chance.
No, tell it.
This might be the only chance.
Tell it.
I have to tell this story, but I just want to say that Sister Annette Alston, she's going to be coming out with a book in a couple of months, a book about Larry Hamm on the road to justice. Give Annette Alston, give her a big hand. She's coming out with that book. So we fought for Faison. We marched. And you know what happened? We fought for Faison, and then they found him guilty. It took him a whole year to find the 5 officers. It should have been 21 officers. It should have been, listen to me, this is not an exaggeration, this is not hyperbole. The director of the police department of Orange went to the city council to ask for an additional appropriation for police in the aftermath of the Faison case. You know why? Because he thought as many as 24 officers might be indicted in that case, because they were involved in the cover-up. It wasn't just the officers that killed Faison in the jail. It was the officers that cleansed, that sanitized the crime scene, that cleaned up the blood, that took the seat out of the police car that had his blood on it. The officers that were in the police precinct who would not say that anything was going on. That's why the reporter from the Star-Ledger said he was surprised that it was only 5. But because of the people's fight, because of the People's Organization for Progress and other organizations that was with us, for the first time in history, 5 officers went to jail in connection with a police brutality case. When I was riding down 280 and I got a phone call. They were found guilty in December. I was on 280 in January. They said, Mr. Hamm, what do you think about what they did to, what Judge Liflin did in the Faison case? I said, what did Judge Liflin do? He said they voided all the guilty verdicts in the Faison case. I didn't even know that a jury's verdicts could be voided.
Yeah.
Liflin, who had been appointed by Ronald Reagan, voided the guilty verdicts on some type of technicality. The next day, the People's Organization for Progress was in the street, and we were demanding that the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey appeal this decision of Liflin, because they were reluctant. But they did appeal it, but they did just what the same thing they did in the Diallo case. What did they do in Diallo? They moved it from Manhattan to Albany, New York. What did they do with Faison? They